Hey, and welcome to Matt and Jess TV. I am Matt Roast.
And I'm Jessica Bun Bun.
We're here with our Mayfair Witches Season 2, Episode 4 reaction and review. There are some big events that happen within this episode, but first and foremost, I just want to give some love to Harry Hamlin, who basically went out there and hit 3 home runs within this episode. My two favorite Harry Hamlin moments of the entire series happen here. Starting first and foremost with him humming so that Moira cannot read his mind, which I thought was hysterical.
It's so funny.
And then, on top of all of that, Cortland's just like, okay, I'll help you. Let's just have some breakfast. We'll get some steak and eggs. And then he's just sitting there eating his sad bowl of cereal. And I'm just like, we're in the midst of this egg shortage. And I'm just like, I see you, Cortland. I'm the same way, just sitting around eating my sad cereal, feeling like, where's my steak and eggs?
Oh, Cortland. He is having a time. This was a very good episode for him. It was also a good episode to just kind of really start to get some footing on Cortland as a character in general.
Yeah.
This whole season, actually. I mean, we're learning a lot about his dad, about his relationship with his dad, that his dad was actually the person that was working with the Talamasca for a while there, that he had a relationship going on there, that it wasn't necessarily Cortland. It was just Cortland just stepped in because Julien wasn't there anymore. You said it best the last review. Cortland might as well be named Cortland. He doesn't really matter. Doesn't matter that he's a Mayfair. Nobody really takes him seriously, and nobody's really connected with him in any kind of way. He's just this lost guy.
He's basically built a throne for himself, constructed on his own delusion. And that's fun sometimes to watch as a character. And where I think this season is going right, especially at this point, they're just allowing us to have a little bit more fun. And I think this episode in particular, it really dives into the weirdness of this universe. I mean, this is as good of a setup for a Talamasca show as we've gotten so far. Everything going on here with Sip, but we do still have larger mysteries. What's going to happen with Rowan and Julien as presented at the end of this episode?
And what is Escher doing? What is he doing? Why does he have Lasher? Why has he taken off? Why didn't he bring him to their holding cells? I don't understand. And what was his connection with Julien? What were they up to?
We're going to get into that and a whole lot more. Before we do, though, be sure to hit that subscribe button, because that is a great way to cast a spell to make sure don't miss any more videos on Mayfair Witches. Also, this past week, a trailer came out for Yellow Jackets Season 3, which is coming this Valentine's Day. We're going to be back again with all sorts of coverage of that show. We don't want you to miss that.
Absolutely.
All right, let's just get first and foremost into what I think is the biggest mystery coming out of this episode. We see Rowan jump through these hoops and try to figure out whatever she can to get to this other universe. I wouldn't call it an alternate universe by any means, but it's basically the
sort of like the dead universe, I guess, because he's not with us anymore.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it. We're in the dead universe at this point, so she can communicate with Julien. Is this a good idea, or is this a recipe for disaster?
Disaster. I just don't think Julien, with what his motives were with the Talamasca and Escher and everything that was going on, I don't see what his motivation would be to help.
I think this is just an interesting position for Rowan to be in, because she clearly wants answers. She knows that she's already, screwed this up in a number of different ways. I mean, for starters, Lasher's now out there. Who knows where? We also have the JoJo and Daphne situation that has unraveled because of her.
Yep.
She just wants somebody in order to help her. And at this point, she kind of feels like, okay, Julien may be the best chance that I have.
Yeah, Julien has answers. I think Julien has a lot of answers. I don't think he's going to give any of those answers. I don't even think when Cortland sort of took over his place with the Talamasca and Escher and everything that was going on, I don't even think Cortland has all the answers. I think he got as much as you need to know kind of thing. And because of this Victrola and his blood, and that you're still able to get to him and talk to him, I mean, has Escher been able to talk to him in any kind of way, or is it only Dolly Jean and her sister that are like, oh yeah, we're in love with him, and we get to have these times with him. He's a complicated man, but we still want to be with him. It's just like, oh my goodness, what is it about Julien that everybody likes so much? Because I've only had a tiny bit of time with him when he was with Cortland, and he is something else.
Here's my 2-word answer. Ted Levine. Who does not want to hang out with Buffalo Bill for a moment here? No, I really don't know with this guy. He's got to have some sort of weird charisma. I
Yeah.
kind of feel like if I'm just going to have a tinfoil hat theory right now, and this comes from no knowledge of what's ahead on the books or anything else because we haven't read them, but I just sort of feel like maybe Julien will help Rowan ... under certain conditions where she's going to have to make some sort of deal. It's going to be a crummy deal. It's not going to be something that works out particularly well, but it may give Julien a little bit more power or influence even from the dead world. He's still going to be able to do more things.
Yeah, I just wonder if there's a bigger plan to get Julien back. And that's sort of why we've had Dolly Jean being very shifty about things. She doesn't want to give Rowan all the information because she's got this Julien secret where she's able to spend time with him. And maybe there is more of a deal going on with, Lasher and Escher to be able to get together. We've seen Lasher go from sort of this dead demon world into like a human body. So is it possible that they're able to get Julien back in some sort of way, shape, or form? And that's what's happening here.
As we have learned from certain other hit shows, what is dead may never die. And that is a mantra that Mayfair Witches seems to be very much sticking with. And I think this idea of immortality. And I'm being kind of ironic here, but I'm also kind of not. Like, this is a world where you do have Lestat and Louis, and you have these vampires, and there is this knowledge about a lot of them out there, where it's sort of like if you are a powerful witch or warlock or whatever, maybe you are kind of looking at this stuff and being like, oh, they get to live forever. Why can't we? Why can't we figure something out? Like, I think there is kind of maybe a level of supernatural frustration going on.
Yeah, and let's talk about Rowan a little bit throughout this episode, because her basically telling Moira to get the Talamasca to bring back Lasher and just park him outside the house, that she can have enough power to help Daphne and JoJo. I was just like, what are you talking about, girl? The Talamasca is basically like a supernatural FBI. Why? In any way, shape, or form are they going to be bringing him back so that you can have a little bit of power to undo some mess that you made? I think there's just this part of like non-reality that she's just living in, where she just kind of thinks everything's falling together for her in some kind of way. It's basically like somebody gets arrested and put in jail, and it's just like, well, can you just bring them out just for a second? I just need them for just park them outside the house. You can leave them in the handcuffs, whatever. And when I'm done, you can cart them back off to jail. Okay, citizen, we'll do that for you.
This is still the biggest problem that I have with this show, because I understand that Cortland has built the throne of his own delusion, but so has Rowan.
I know.
And she's the lead character, and it is hard for me to get fully invested in her sometimes, because she kind of oscillates between being delusional and also being clueless. And when you are clueless, sometimes it's better to try to get more information. And instead of doing that, she often just throws herself in head first into things that she doesn't really understand. And I don't know. I mean, maybe if I had magical powers, which clearly I do not, but maybe I would be as impulsive as her. It's just, I have a hard time relating to it or understanding it on the outside.
Okay, when this episode started, did anybody else think that you missed an episode or something? When this started, I was just like, I had to check, because I was kind of like, did I skip an episode? Why is Rowan on a boat with Lark? What is going on here? It's like all of a sudden they're happy. There's somewhere else. There was no like boop, 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 boop. Yeah. We're in the past now to give you some sort of backstory. It was a very odd start to this episode. I mean, as I kind of realized where we were, I'm like, oh, okay, we're in the past.
Yeah.
It was good to get some information on that, of why she doesn't trust him, why their relationship broke apart, the mistakes that he made, and he definitely made some mistakes, why she's as closed off as she is and doesn't really trust anybody. And doesn't really get into deeper relationships with anybody.
Yeah.
Everybody's very held at the surface and nothing really deeper. And this explained a lot.
It did. It also gave me, for at least the first minute or two of this scene, one of my favorite TV cliches, which is that if you don't know where a scene is set, they're just going to put a character in a sweatshirt that has like Stanford on the front of it. And we're all supposed to immediately assume, because she has a Stanford sweatshirt on, that, oh, she would be somewhere close to that. People wear sweatshirts all the time when they're in a completely different part of the country. It wasn't until we zoomed out where it became kind of apparent as to where we were in that scene. It was just so ridiculous.
Of course, absolutely. I mean, you're gonna wear shirts from all different places that people have bought you.
Yeah.
You know, here's an airport shirt from St. Louis. You know, I've got a shirt that I wear from Humber, which is from back up in Ontario where I went to college. I'm
Yeah.
not there now. It's just like, guys.
Yeah, it's all just so, all of that is so silly in a way. But in general, I will say this about the Lark storyline. Like, there is a part of it that does feel very silly and at times cliche, where it does feel obvious to an extent as to where things are going. But yet at the same time, and we've talked about this, that it's nice to have a human element on the show, but it's also I'm glad, I should say, that Lark is not a dummy and that he's innately curious himself, and that he's kind of just like, why is Rowan doing some of the things that she's doing? Something is a little bit off there, and he's taking a little bit of matters into his own hands.
Yeah, and that makes sense. I mean, seeing sort of from their relationship in the past,
Yeah.
their relationship now, she's acting really sketchy. He doesn't know what's going on. He might be feeling a little bit used as well. Like,
Yeah.
oh, check this out, but don't look any deeper and don't tell anybody, and I'm not telling you anything. At that point, I'd be like, you know what? You can ask for a favor and that's fine or whatever, but
Yeah.
you can't just keep me in the dark about what I'm doing, because what I'm doing is kind of off the books or could
Yeah.
get me in trouble. I should at least know what I'm getting in trouble for, especially when this blood sample comes back as not human. It's like, okay, no. So I was glad to see him, snake that cup and try to figure things out for himself. I still do love the Lark character as well. I love that there's
Mhm.
that human element. We even had a moment where Rowan was like, "Oh, wow, man, it feels good to just kind of be human again." I was like, "Yeah, man, like you are still human."
I just hope that this is going a direction where, even if we get an episode or two of it, because long term, I'm pretty concerned that Mark's just going to get killed. But short term,
Yeah.
I kind of want to see a situation where he kind of finds out a little bit more about Rowan and her magic. But in turn, we suddenly have this situation where here is just a full fledged human with no attachment to any of these other organizations, suddenly
Yep.
finding out about all of this. Like, how does he handle it? What does he do about it? This is not the same as, Interview with the Vampire is a very different sort of organization that's going on here. And I just think there's a lot of just fun stuff that could be temporarily explored there before somebody is like, he knows too much, let's kill him. And then we're just all sad.
Yeah, I don't know how Lark makes it out of this alive. I
No.
don't. Unless he ends up being able to gain some sort of power through something. It's just he's going to end up knowing too much. If it
Yeah.
isn't the Mayfairs that are kind of like, we got to deal with him, it's going to
Yeah.
be the Talamascas, like, no way. And Escher's just going to come in and scramble his brain.
Let's talk about Moira for a moment here, because who would have thought Moira would have been such a voice of reason at times in
I
this
know.
episode, including when she's telling Rowan, yeah, there's a lot of families still around, but they don't really want to hang out with you. You used all of them. You drug them all to this place. You had this thing happen. And now look what's going on with JoJo and Daphne.
Yeah.
It's a really interesting arc that I think we're going to have with Moira, because I think she's going to get continuously pushed and pulled in all these sort of directions where I think she wants to help her family. I don't think she fully trusts Rowan. I think she realizes that she might need Rowan for some things, but she may also feel used and confused by the Talamasca at the same time.
Yeah, I think she's feeling very used. She's being brought into all these different directions. She doesn't really have anybody that she can really trust. Even though she doesn't really trust Rowan, and Rowan's really unpredictable in a lot of ways. That I think she just knows that they're both kind of on the same path to getting answers. And it's kind of like, well, it's an unlikely partnership, but we are both on the same road and we both want the same answers. So, okay, we'll temporarily work together until I can find out what happened.
I kind of feel like at the end of this season, these two may be on relatively close to the same page because I think she's going to be, despite being pretty young, I think she's going to be a grounding influence on Rowan if Rowan kind of spirals out of control or doesn't know what to do, aka some typical Rowan things on this show. Because this is still really about family, as odd as it sounds. It's
Yeah.
not just Mayfair Witch, it's Mayfair Witches. So I think that we're going to see some sort of pseudo unification of this family by the end of this season. And I think Moira right now is one of the few Mayfairs I kind of trust to reel her in a little bit.
I like her so much.
She's
She's
a-
been such
yeah.
a great addition to the show.
She's been a really good character in a time in which, to me, a lot of the other people are a little bit too unwieldy. Like, we're not spending enough time with Dolly Jean for me to really like get fully immersed in that part of the story.
Okay, let's talk about Sip, who
Yep.
is he's having a time. And I feel
Yes.
I feel so bad for him. I mean, he goes down to see Lasher, learns that he's not there, that Escher has taken him somewhere. Escher's like basically left him a message to be like, "Hey man, sorry for your luck, but I've sort of brought you up with the elders and that, you're basically going to take the fall for everything and now you're arrested. Sorry for your luck, but this is how it's going." And it's just I just feel so bad for him. I mean, Sip is one of my favorite characters on the show. He wants to believe in the best. And I
Yeah.
really like characters like that are kind of like he sees the good in people. He wants to do good. He's part of an organization that I think does some good, but they also do stuff like this. And
Yeah.
I think he's just really stuck where he's got this power that he wants to use for good, but he's working directly, or he has been working directly with somebody who's using power for not good. Something is going on with Escher and Julien and Lasher, and there's some sort of connection there. And now Sip is taking some kind of a fall.
He's really just like the person who joins this big company and he just struts in on the first day and being like, I'm going to make these changes. I'm going to save the day. And then he just gets there and everything is terrible. And it's not exactly what he expected. He's basically running into multiple versions of Meryl Streep in The Devil Wears Prada. And he can't really do.
Or Guillermo on What We Do in the Shadows in that last season where he's like, yeah, man, I got my job. I'm going to do well. And they're going to respect me. And it's all going to go great.
And it never goes great. And it stinks for Sip because I do think he is an inherently good character who wants to do the right thing. And I think he will be able to, at some point, get more of the Talamasca maybe on his side. I think the problem is just this is a very complicated and conflicted relationship with this group. And this group is really complicated. I will say this. I love the scene of him walking through the hall and we see all these sort of supernatural beings that have been captured. And I'm just sitting here being like, I want this spinoff now because this stuff to me is really, really cool and really interesting.
It reminded me of the woods on Gen V underneath the university.
Yeah, no, that's true. That's a good call. One of my bigger problems with Mayfair Witches, and this is no real direct slight with the show, is it's just that because this is so closely based on books, there's certain things that are going to just go a certain way. And I hope with the Talamasca, there might be sort of a little bit more freedom to kind of explore, not to use the word free again, but freely and sort of see some things that are kind of tangential to the Anne Rice universe that maybe we can all kind of discover at the same time.
Okay, so we're going to talk briefly about Taltos. Now, as Matt said, we haven't read the books and we do not know the spoilers. We don't want the spoilers. So just watching the show, this is the first time that I can remember actually hearing this. You see Moira touching the Victrola and she's like yelling this word. It's the same word that's written on a little piece of burnt paper that Sip has found. I don't know what it is yet. I don't have any theories on what it is yet. It's just a word at this point that I've seen and I've heard, but I'm very curious because it feels like it's going to be very connected to a lot of what is going on.
Yeah, if I'm going to go in like the pure dark forces perspective of a lot of this, maybe this is the Mayfair Witches version of Sauron, which I would be kind of okay with because what makes Sauron so interesting on Lord of the Rings, which I know is everybody's favorite thing in the world to talk about. No, not the Rings of Power. That show is meh. But anyway.
You love the Lord of the Rings. Don't pretend. I don't like Lord of the Rings. I don't pretend. I said what I said.
I like the Lord of the Rings. I am iffy on the Rings of Power, but mostly because in theory, what makes Sauron such an interesting villain is that you don't really ever see him or get to understand him all that well. It's more of this like mysterious force. And I don't know if they're going to be going that direction with
Mhm.
Taltos, but for a lot of us newbies to this world,
Mhm.
it does feel like this is this mysterious entity, this idea that like sparks and really invokes a heavy, heavy emotion out of people. And I think it can be really fascinating if you do a show like this where you have sort of this unseen force that's kind of a driver in a lot of people's motivations. If we're going this direction, I hope we don't find out too much more about Taltos this season. I hope it's saved for a potential season 3 or something like
Mm.
that, because it's valuable to have something to build towards. And if you reveal everything right away, especially with a show like this, it can get kind of unwieldy and there's too many powers that are out of control.
Yeah, I agree. We're like kind of getting to this halfway mark now. So if they're going to introduce it now, which is
Yeah.
fine, then there's not for me. I feel like this is something that could be savored, that could be a little bit, till we get to the end of the season, and then next season can be all about this.
Yeah, the only other comparison I can think of right now is when they started. This is for all you CW heads out there. It's when they started to mention Klaus on the Vampire Diaries, and we hadn't
Wow,
met him
that's a
yet.
deep pull.
It is a deep pull, but I remember being so excited to see Klaus because everybody was just talking about how like dangerous and infinite, and
Yes.
then Joseph Morgan comes out and turns out to be like the best actor in the entire
He
universe.
was so good.
Yeah, and it's just if they're building up something like that, I would be really, really excited. It's just we're dealing with such a limited amount of information here as non-readers that it could go in a completely different direction, and I can just be sitting here pieing myself in the face.
But that's what makes this so exciting for us, especially because we haven't read the books and we don't know what's coming
Yeah,
up. That it's like they're dropping these details, and it's definitely making us excited.
yeah.
This season is really good.
This is an improvement to me pretty
Yeah,
significantly over season 1.
agreed.
This is the most fun I've had with an episode of Mayfair Witches, so keep that up. Continue to have Cortland engage in some clownery.
Mhm.
I'm more than fine with that. But hit that subscribe button, guys, so you don't miss any more Mayfair Witches coverage. And you can support us further by joining our Patreon. That link is in the description. We are covering exclusively there in video form The Pit on Max, a great medical drama, as well as the thriller Prime Target on Apple TV Plus. Thank you guys so
Thank
much.
you.
We'll see you here next time.